we changed the title to the house. It was my separate property. My spouse was advantaged. I want to undo it. And there are a number of cases that explain what one needs to do to overcome that presumption of undue influence. Again, it's another area where during a marriage people probably have little or no idea this body of law is out there, and the transactions they're engaging in could later result in a significant dispute.
Right. I heard one story, it was kind of an interesting one, of a situation where this man threw a surprise birthday party for his wife and said, honey, just congratulations, on your whatever 40th birthday, and for a special surprise, here's the keys for your new Mercedes. And then later they end up, of course, a few years later, splitting up, and then he's saying, no, I didn't mean it, it was community property. And she says, well, I have all the witnesses, here's the videotape, honey, here's the keys. I mean, what am I supposed to think?
I can say it is not uncommon for people to register a car in one spouse's name, and there often are disputes about whether the car was a gift or not.
Yeah.
Very common dispute.
Yeah, so we have these areas, as I understand it, the presumption is, in general, that whatever the title is, it's community property if you acquired it during marriage.
That's right. There's a general presumption that all property acquired during the marriage is community property.
Okay. And by the way, there is another difference here, as I understand it. That relates to joint tenancy property. So we treat them a little different for estate tax reporting, but as far as for divorce, as I understand it, basically joint tenancy is just like any other community property.
Yes, it's not as common now, but I know when I first started practicing, it seemed like most spouses held title in joint tenancy. By statute, the law says title held in joint tenancy is presumed to be community property. The big difference between the two, certainly I think the estate planners, and I think most family lawyers get this too, unfortunately the real estate industry didn't seem to get it until maybe more recently, that if a spouse passes away, if it's in joint tenancy, of course the surviving spouse receives the property by right of survivorship.
Right.
However, had they held property as community property, they would receive a stepped-up tax basis, meaning the new tax basis in the property would be the value at the date of death, as opposed to perhaps a very low tax basis that they may have had had they purchased the property many years earlier. And so by holding property in joint tenancy could result in a significant negative tax impact in the form of capital gains taxes for the surviving spouse.
Right. So that's it's a big consideration. Our topic isn't really estate planning today, but it is something to bear in mind that there are these different aspects of this that we may have a little different result from an estate planning standpoint from when we're dividing property in divorce. Of course, the other thing is that you can devise, you can give your share of community property, but joint tenancy is that arrangement decides how to get it to your spouse. And of course, then we have the development also that we now have a community property with right of survivorship. That's sort of a recent development in California. Okay. How is mediation used as an alternative to a court proceeding related to divorce?
Mediation, of course, it's a method of trying to use a neutral third party to assist the parties in arriving at an agreement to resolve the issues in their dissolution of marriage. I think it's become more and more common that a lot of people at least explore mediation and try it. I've been of the belief for a long time that many cases that could be successfully mediated might resolve just as easily without mediation. And whether you go through mediation or I'll call it the traditional route of a dissolution of marriage where somebody files and both parties are represented, many of those cases settle anyway without going to court or little or no court action, and whether it's mediation or some other way, you're still going to have to present the same paperwork, do the same disclosures, fulfill your duties toward each other, your fiduciary duties as far as disclosure, and end up with the same result, a judgment that divides property, characterizes property, determines support rights, child custody rights, and attorney's fees and costs. So there may not be a lot of difference in terms of the amount of work and the time and the expense, but I think generally there's a perception by a lot of folks that it is much cheaper to go through mediation, and certainly if it's successful, it probably often is, and it does allow the parties to control the process, sometimes to one party's detriment, but at least they handle it the way they want to.
Okay. So do you ever have people come in, or a person come in and say, well, I'm thinking about this divorce, doing a divorce, and you sort of talk them out of it?
I think I have, not deliberately. As attorneys, ethically, we're not supposed to do anything that promotes divorce. So I think most attorneys take that seriously, and they really explore with someone, have they made a decision? Is it a final decision? Are they interested in reconciliation? Have they considered alternatives? And sometimes when you explain to people what the consequences are, they rethink it, and sometimes it is just the financial consequences, which there are, I would say, almost always negative financial consequences, probably for both parties as a result of a dissolution of marriage. So I think some people will find out, for example, how much child and spousal support they might be paying, and they might rethink it and say, gee, I don't know if that's a good idea.
A long time ago, there was a movie, I think it was called Fitzwilly. I don't know if you even know what I was talking about. It was with Dick Van Dyke. His wife was living in the family residence. I think she's still driving a Cadillac, and he's driving a Volkswagen. And so, anyway, financially, divorce can be devastating because you have these things that you had together. Now you've got to divide a house. Well, now what? You're going to go out and get half as much house. Not to mention there may be some income taxes that have to be paid related to that sale, and there may be other considerations, related to basically having to live off half as much money. I mean, it can be really difficult. So think carefully about that. Any final words? We've got about maybe 30 seconds. So final thoughts related to words of wisdom on divorce.
Words of wisdom. I think before filing, I'd explore the alternatives. I would at least talk to several qualified attorneys, certified specialists, or if not certified specialists, make sure they're attorneys that are experienced and that they know what they're doing, and get good advice before you go forward.
Okay. Mark, thank you so much for being with me today. Folks, I hope you found this to be an enlightening, informative show, and I hope that you can join us next time on Financial Insider Weekly.